So maybe this will help some of you that are having trouble still. So what I'm going to do, and the way you calculate the expected values for a two-way table, when you have two or more categories and two or more columns, or two or more rows, or two or more columns, you're going to take, you got to find the sum of each of the columns, and the sum of each of the rows, and then the total for the table, and that should add up. One way to check you did this right is that sum should equal this sum. So that's my table total. So if I want to find that expected value right there, notice that's the first row, the first column. So what you do is you take the sum of the first row, or first column I mean, times the sum of the first row and divide it by the table total. So I went first row sum, first column sum times first row sum divided by the table total, and that will be the number that goes right here. To get that cell's answer right there, notice I'm still in the first row, but I'm in the second column. So I'm going to take the second column number, because I want the second column, right? So the sum of the second column is 94 times the sum of the first row, and you would multiply those and then divide by the table total, and that's the number that goes right there. To get this one, we're in the second row, first column, so first column times second row divided by table total. Okay, so first column times the sum of the second row, first column sum times the second row sum divided by table total. And then of course for this last one we're going to multiply what? Well, I'm hoping you think second row, second column. So second row, second column, multiply those two numbers, divide by the table total. And that's the number that goes there. So that's how you get the expected values. How do you calculate chi-square? So the way you calculate the chi-square test statistic, let's see, let me make this look like a chi-square. You find the differences, so the observed minus the expected. That's basically the residual, comparing it back to that work we did last week. You're going to square that, divide it by the expected value, and you find the sum of all those numbers. So what I did with the spreadsheet is I calculated, these are the numbers I just calculated, where I went 71 times 65 divided by 165 worked out to be that number. 94 times 65 divided by 165 worked out to be that number, and so on and so forth. So I've calculated the E's, I were given the O's, the observed and the expected. So now we're going to find the differences. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to do 16, which is my observed value for that position in the matrix, minus the expected. So O minus E worked out to be that number. This O minus that E worked out to be that number. This O minus that E was that, and this O minus that is that. Now one thing I noticed as I was doing this, that these are just the same values except positive and negatives. Maybe I've never been paying attention. I think that's just unique to this problem. It might not be, and I've just never noticed, but it's something I noticed today. I wouldn't say this is always true. And it may be, and I just haven't ever noticed. So then, we've just calculated all those differences, and that's what these numbers represent. So now we're going to square each of those, and some of you still are a little stuck with squaring. On your calculator, you should be able to see an x squared button. What I did here with my spreadsheet is, so what you're going to do is type in your negative 11.969 yada yada yada, then hit your x squared. Some calculators have a caret key, so you'll type in parenthesis negative 11.969 whatever caret 2. Got to make sure you stick it in a parenthesis. Some calculators will automatically do that. If your calculator slaps an A and S for answer, and you square that acts like a parenthesis. But if you don't have the negative sign in a parenthesis, you're going to get a negative number, because -1 times some value, I'll call it x squared, the -1's not getting squared, just the x's if you don't stick it in parentheses. If you put them in parentheses, then everything's getting squared. Order of operations, that algebra stuff coming back. So I squared each of those values, got those. So that's the O minus the E squared for each of them. Now I'm going to divide each of those by the expected value. So I took this number, that's the square, right, square differences, divided by the expected, and that's where I came up with that. That's how I did O minus E squared divided by E. So it's this number divided by that number, this number divided by that number, this number divided by that number, and I'm getting those, of course, and then this number divided by that number. So we've done all of this work. The only thing left to do is find the sum. So that means add up those numbers, those 4 numbers, and that's your chi-square test statistic, and that's the correct value for this problem. So I encourage you to use the applets too. I mean, because that'll tell you p-values and all that. So hope this helps.